Shelter beneath the shadow of the Almighty. Imagine for a brief moment that your mind is no longer disturbed by small worries, the invisible calls of responsibility, or the fragments of memory that sometimes tighten your heart. Picture yourself stepping into a space untouched by time, an inner chamber no one can enter, where nothing can harm you or shake your spirit. In that place there are no phone calls that trouble you, no expenses waiting for you to handle, no expectations from family that force you to brace yourself every day. There is only a gentle silence, soft and luminous, like a quiet stream flowing through the deepest part of your soul. The place you are standing is not a house made of brick walls or wooden doors. It needs no locks or barriers. It is a shelter beneath the shadow of the Almighty, a world unlike the world you see each day. In that place, fear does not exist because it has nowhere to cling to. It is like darkness disappearing the moment light appears. In life, people tend to believe that safety lies in things they can touch. A sturdy key, a charm passed from hand to hand, a mantra repeated endlessly, a ritual performed at the right hour. Yet the more they depend on those things, the more uneasy the heart becomes, because deep down everyone knows those objects cannot protect the mind. They may comfort for a few minutes, but they cannot quiet the heart when the storms of life arrive. That is why you are invited here, not to find temporary comfort, but to remember something your soul has always known yet forgot in the long days of exhaustion. True protection comes from the awareness of being united with the one who created all things. When you are in him, nothing outside can touch you. When your mind rests under the shadow of the Almighty, everything else becomes nothing more than a distant echo. Let this image slowly fill your breath like the first morning light slipping through a half-open window. A shelter untouched by time, unbroken by people, unmoved by circumstances. A place where you need no defenses because his presence itself is the shield covering your life. The ancients wrote that whoever dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And in this very moment, as your mind becomes still, you have already taken your first step into that place. The great truth at the center: there is no power outside of God. We live in a world where from childhood we were taught to fear countless things. Fear of misfortune, fear of envy, fear of the wrong day, fear of careless words, someone might say, fear of objects said to bring bad luck, fear of the unseen, yet believing it has power over our lives. People grow up in that atmosphere without realizing that every time they believe these things, they are giving power to what has no power at all. From there, fear grows like a shadow, and the more authority it is given, the larger it becomes until it covers the mind. In daily life, many carry small objects that appear harmless, a charm from someone, a string said to ward off negativity, a small paper with words called a mantra, repeated rituals meant to buy a sense of safety. But all these things are symbols of a deep, hidden insecurity. Because when people believe that an object keeps them safe, it means they believe that without it they are vulnerable. And that belief is the spiritual trap that pulls them away from the truth. Emmet Fox called this the worship of false gods. Not wooden statues or carved images, but fears disguised as something sacred. Every time you see a situation as stronger than you, every time you believe illness, accidents, or failure have authority over you, you are lifting them up as second powers competing with the Creator. But truth never changes. There is no second power. There is no force outside of God. He is not the strongest being. He is the only being. This is something every soul knows, but the mind forgets because it is trained to believe in appearances. People observe the world through their eyes and assume everything moves from outside to inside. They think situations make them afraid. People hurt them. Bad news steals their peace. But the truth moves in the opposite direction. Your belief gives the situation its power. Your fear opens the door for danger. The wavering in your mind allows appearances to become threats. If you believe that a second force exists outside of God, even if you never say it, deep down you have created a hidden idol. When that happens, the mind splits the world into two forces, one good and one bad, one lucky and one unlucky, one capable of protecting and one capable of destroying. But once reality is divided, fear becomes a constant companion because you will always think you must fight the other half. The truth emphasized in Scripture is oneness. The universe operates under one principle. If two sources of power existed, everything would collapse into chaos. There cannot be two centers. There cannot be two supreme wills. There cannot be two fundamental causes. Everything else is only a shadow created by misplaced belief. Think about the moments when you were afraid of something. Did you notice that as fear increased, your mind instantly exaggerated the situation, making it look heavier, more real, more dangerous? But when you rest in His presence, that same situation becomes smaller, weaker, fading until it disappears. Not because it vanished on its own, but because you withdrew the power you once gave it. Fear is not merely an emotion, it is a form of belief, a form of reverse prayer. When you fear something may happen, you are using your own creative energy to contribute to that possibility. Fear is faith put in the wrong place, faith given to the shadow instead of the light. That is why Emmet Fox said that every moment of fear is a moment of worshipping a false god, a god with no real substance, yet believed to possess power. It is that misplaced belief that makes the shadow appear real. But if you turn around and look directly, you will see the shadow has no substance. Appearances have no inherent force. Circumstances have no power of their own. They only reflect what is moving within consciousness. If consciousness is joined with fear, darkness spreads. If consciousness is joined with truth, light fills everything. When you look deeply into spiritual law, you understand why those who stand firmly in faith walk through trials unharmed, not because they are privileged or exempt from challenges, but because within their mind the idea that any other power can harm them simply does not exist. They do not fear, because they know there is nothing to fear. They do not doubt, because they know there is nothing outside of Him. When the mind is unified with the one principle, life itself shifts. Everything begins to move according to the order of light. The things that once made you anxious lose their ability to threaten you. The situations that once made you tremble become nothing more than the echo of an old belief. If you understand this deeply, you begin to see that protection does not come from external actions, but from internal awareness. When you know there is no second power, fear loses its ground. When fear loses its ground, darkness has nowhere to remain. Then you live light as breath, steady as a mountain, peaceful as a still lake in the early morning. And in that moment you live beneath the shadow of the Almighty. Now I want to ask you something simple but important. In these recent days, is there anything you have been unintentionally giving power to? A fear, a piece of bad news, a certain person, or a situation that makes you uneasy? If you recognize that, thank you for your honesty and for being here to look gently within yourself, the secret place of the Most High, the true home of the mind. There is a deep truth. Few people ever learn to live fully. A person does not truly live where their body stands. They live in the place where their mind resides. The real address of a human being is not the street, the apartment, or the city they stay in. The real address lies in the stream of thoughts, emotions, and beliefs they nurture each day. Someone may live in a beautiful home, yet their mind is dwelling in fear. They may be surrounded by family, yet their awareness lives in loneliness. They may possess many things, yet inwardly they inhabit a land of lack. That is why when Scripture says, "Whoever dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty," it is not only speaking of a distant spiritual realm, it is speaking of the true house you build within your mind. Wherever your awareness is grounded, that is where you are living. Many people treat the awareness of God's presence like a place to visit. When crisis strikes, they run into it as if searching for temporary shelter. But once things calm down, they leave and return to old habits, old thoughts, old fears. They resemble someone who visits a friend's home only on stormy days and leaves as soon as the sky clears. But the one who is truly protected is not the visitor, it is the resident. There is a great difference between visiting and dwelling. When you visit a house, you are not familiar with its corners. You remain cautious. You do not know where to sit, what to touch, or how to feel at home. But in your own home, everything is familiar. The light falls in ways you recognize. Your steps on the floor feel as if the house knows you. You know where it is warm and where it is still. That sense of belonging creates safety. The awareness of God's presence works the same way. When you enter only when you need help, your mind spends most of its time outside in the realm of fear and complexity. But when you decide to dwell in Him, every cell of your mind begins shifting into a completely different state. It is like moving from a damp place into a house overflowing with light. Once you move in, you no longer want to leave, because the peace there is unlike anything you have ever known. But how do you dwell? How do you make the presence of God the true home of your mind rather than a resting station? Begin with the simplest step. Form the habit of placing your awareness on Him from the first moment of the morning. Emmet Fox called this the golden hour. You do not need long prayers, only a few quiet minutes to establish the position of your mind before entering the stream of the day. A right beginning determines everything that follows. You may sit down, take a deep breath, and say silently, God is here. He is present in my mind. I dwell in His presence. My heart is the secret place of the Most High. When you do this, your mind receives a very clear signal. It aligns. It knows where it belongs. It recognizes who its center is. From that moment on throughout the day, you only need to hold a thin golden thread of connection. This image represents remembering Him in the simplest moments. When washing dishes, you remember Him. When driving, you remember Him. When sitting in a tense meeting, you remember Him. When making a difficult decision, you remember Him. No words needed, no ritual required, only a gentle thought. God is here. I dwell in His shadow. That gentle remembering transforms the entire inner world. It slows your reactions, softens your emotional responses, and keeps your mind from being swept away by the noise around you. It becomes like a clear atmosphere surrounding every movement, every word, every feeling. When you maintain this golden thread long enough, it becomes natural. Your mind begins to sense His presence as easily as sensing daylight. Then something remarkable happens. Everything in life, even the unexpected things, no longer threatens you as before. Not because life is calmer, but because your mind no longer lives in the old place. It has moved into a new home, the home of peace, the home of truth, the home of presence. People who dwell in Him in this way become those who walk without trembling, face trials without breaking, and live in the world without being carried away by it. Because they have found the true dwelling place of the soul. And when the mind lives in that place, everything else becomes surface movement, unable to touch the inner core. If you maintain the habit of entering this secret place every morning, holding the golden thread throughout the day and returning to it before sleep, you will begin to understand that living under the shadow of the Almighty is not a theory. It is a state of being, a dwelling place, a true home of the soul. And once you are there, you no longer walk alone. You no longer struggle to hold yourself up. You no longer fear the days ahead, because you know clearly that you dwell in Him and He dwells in you. The shield of faith, the power of the mind when it aligns with truth. Faith is not a fragile emotion rising and falling with circumstances. Faith is not a temporary surge of inspiration or a feeling that dissolves like smoke. Faith is not the strained effort of trying to climb a spiritual ladder. Faith, in its purest meaning, is the disciplined action of the mind when it chooses to stand on absolute truth. Faith is a deliberate choice, a clear direction of awareness. The deepest conclusion of the soul that the only power operating in the universe is the power of God. When your mind accepts this, not as a vague hope, but as an obvious fact, the shield of protection forms immediately. And it does not come from outside forces. It comes from the internal alignment between you and the supreme principle. Many people think faith means feeling peaceful, but feelings often betray. The body can be tired, emotions can fluctuate, mood can shift because of a small event or a careless word. Feeling is not the measure of faith. Faith is a decision. You can choose to have faith even when your emotions have not caught up yet. And it is that decision that creates real strength. Faith is the creative energy of the mind when it turns entirely in one direction, and that direction is God. In spiritual law, fear and faith are the same in one way. Both are streams of mental energy. They differ only in direction. Fear is faith placed in darkness. Faith is faith placed in light. Fear is believing that something harmful may come and has the right to touch you. Faith is the assurance that only good has substance and only the power of God has the final word. When you understand this, you see why faith is a shield. Not because it blocks danger from outside, but because it prevents the mind from giving power to anything except Him. The shield does not exist in form, it exists in awareness. When the mind stands in truth, fear has no place to cling to. It is like darkness trying to enter a room filled with light. Darkness is not defeated. It simply cannot exist there. Faith works in that same way. And when it is active, you do not need to force anything. You simply remain in truth. When fear appears, it is not an enemy. It is only a signal showing the mind is beginning to place belief in the wrong direction. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to shout or resist. You only need to correct the direction. When worry rises, you may say silently, I choose to trust God. I choose to stand on truth. I choose to let my mind rest in Him. When you do this, the fear dissolves like a cloud under sunlight. Not because you push it away, but because the light of faith changes the entire atmosphere within your mind. Emmet Fox once said, faith is the lever that adjusts how much good you allow to express in your life. When the lever points toward doubt and fear, the result is darkness. When the lever points toward Him, the result is light. This is something spiritually mature people understand, even if they rarely speak of it. Life is not peaceful because circumstances are easy. Life is peaceful because their mind is placed in the right position. When the position of the mind is right, circumstances adjust accordingly, not by surface miracles, but by the law of consciousness. And that law is stronger than any situation. Remember that faith does not lie in loud words or intense emotion. Faith lies in a fierce calm, a deep stillness untouched by circumstances. This stillness creates the invisible protection Scripture calls a shield. Whenever you face something that stirs your heart, practice one simple but powerful technique. The technique of immediate redirection. When the mind starts imagining the worst, you do not argue with it. You do not try to erase the image. You simply insert a clear statement at that exact moment. God is here. I am safe because I am in Him. I choose faith. I choose truth. I choose light. No need for long phrases. No need for poetry. Only clarity. The mind shifts direction instantly. And when the direction shifts, the energy shifts. And when the energy shifts, the shield forms. Faith is a continuous action. You do not wait for a major crisis to use it. You practice it in the small things. When the morning comes and you feel unsettled, when a message makes you uneasy, when someone says something that hurts your heart, when you face an uncertain task, every moment is an opportunity to practice faith. And each practice expands the shield a little more. Some people wonder why they pray yet remain anxious. It is because they pray with their lips, but in their heart they still believe in the worst outcome. Faith does not lie in the words spoken. It lies in where the mind gives authority. You cannot pray for good while fearing evil. You cannot ask for protection while believing in danger. You cannot walk toward the light while staring at the shadow. Faith is unity. When your mind is united with the principle of truth, protection appears as an inevitable result. Not a privilege, not luck, but law. And law never fails. To train your mind into this state, you can practice a simple but profound exercise. Whenever worry appears, pause and say within, I am worried, but I choose faith. I am unsettled, but I choose light. I am wavering, but I choose to stand in Him. Repeat until your breath slows and your mind grows warm. Peace will come like sunlight breaking through mist, very gentle, yet completely real, and that moment will tell you the shield has been lifted. The science of denial, withdrawing power from the shadows of fear. Fear survives because it always looks for something to lean on. It needs a situation to cling to, an image to enlarge, a story to build upon. When the mind gives it belief, it immediately constructs a false world. And it is that false world that creates anxiety. But the astonishing truth is that fear has no substance of its own. It exists only through the belief you give it. When you withdraw that belief, it loses weight instantly. This is the foundation of the science of denial that Emmet Fox spoke of. Scientific denial is not rejecting truth. It is not closing your eyes to avoid seeing a problem. It is not avoiding reality and not deceiving yourself. Scientific denial is the awakened action of the mind when it looks directly at a situation and calmly declares that the situation has no power of its own. Power belongs to God alone. When you deny, you do not say the situation is not there. You only say it has no authority. And this is the subtle difference that changes an entire life. People suffer not because of events, but because of the meaning they attach to those events. A symptom does not make a person despair. The belief that the symptom has the power to destroy them is what creates despair. A number in a bank account does not make a person afraid. The belief that lack has the right to suffocate their life is what frightens them. Bad news cannot defeat anyone, but the belief that it is stronger than God pushes people into darkness. Therefore, scientific denial is the technique that breaks the core of illusion. It does not change the event immediately. It changes the spiritual relationship between you and the event. And when the relationship shifts, the event loses its power and you return to your true position. Scientific denial has 3 simple yet profound steps. Step 1, recognize clearly what is happening. Do not run. Do not pretend everything is fine while inside you are collapsing. Look at it directly, as if you are standing before a closed door. Step 2, withdraw power from the circumstance with a firm but calm denial. You may say silently, this situation has no power. There is no force here except God. Nothing in appearance can oppose the principle of good. Step 3, affirm the truth. Only good has substance. Only God is power. Only light has reality. When you combine denial and affirmation, the mind naturally returns to divine order. Many people fail at this process because they try to deny from a place of panic. They repeat the denial like a charm while still believing in the worst. They try to deny the event instead of denying the supposed power of the event. And that is why the result does not come. Scientific denial does not require strong emotion. It requires the calm certainty of someone who knows exactly what foundation they are standing on. You are not speaking to convince the circumstance. You are speaking to return your mind to its rightful place. Consider a simple example. You receive news that tightens your chest. The natural reaction is to let imagination run toward dark possibilities. If you let it run, fear will flood your mind like broken water. But if in that exact moment you pause and deny, the entire current shifts direction. When you say there is no power here except God, you are closing the door in front of fear. You are not pushing it away. You are simply not allowing it to enter. You are placing the center back where it belongs. When facing illness, scientific denial does not say the symptom is fake or will vanish instantly. It says the symptom has no authority to define you. It has no right to rise above the principle of life. When facing danger, denial does not say you act carelessly. It says no event operates outside the divine order. When facing financial pressure, denial does not say the numbers do not matter. It says those numbers are not your source. Your source is in Him. One of the strongest images to understand scientific denial is the image of an electric cord. A light bulb shines only when connected to current. If you unplug it, darkness appears not because you fight the light, but because the flow of energy stops. Fear works the same way. It exists only when your mind is plugged into it. When you deny, you unplug that cord. No fighting, no shouting, only withdrawing belief. Try applying this to the smallest things. When a rumor unsettles you, say quietly, "There is no power here except God." When you worry about a loved one, say, "There is no power except His love." When you fear risk at work, say, "Nothing can oppose the principle of good." Repeat until you feel your mind lighten, your breath slow, and a quiet brightness open within. That is when denial has done its work. The most important thing to remember is that denial is not resistance. Resistance tightens the mind. Denial is recognizing and releasing the false claim of power. When you release that claim, appearances lose weight. This is the delicate art of those who live in the light. Now, I want to invite you to do something simple yet powerful. If you want to withdraw power from the fears that cling to you, leave a comment in the form "I am ready to change," or even a single number. It is the sign that you are choosing to step out of illusion and into truth. Scientific prayer, the art of changing consciousness to receive protection. Prayer is one of the most familiar words, yet also one of the most misunderstood. Many people pray as an emergency reaction, a response when life pushes them into a corner, a plea for luck or for a special exception in the laws of life. But prayer, in the spirit of Emmet Fox, is not begging. It is the act of correcting consciousness. It is not asking God to intervene from the outside. It is bringing the mind back to its rightful place within Him. When you pray correctly, the world does not change first. You change first. And when you change, your world follows. The first thing to understand is that you do not pray to persuade God. He does not need persuasion. He does not withhold protection and wait for you to beg before giving it. Protection is His nature, just as light is the nature of the Sunday. You do not need to ask the sun to shine. You only need to step out of the shadow. Prayer is stepping out of the shadow. It is the act of bringing the mind into the light that has always been present. Second, scientific prayer does not depend on emotion. You do not need to feel spiritual to pray correctly. You do not need a high mood or a quiet atmosphere. You only need to follow the right sequence, because prayer is a technique, not a ritual. When you understand the technique, you can pray in a crowded street, in the middle of a sudden event, or in a moment when fear makes your heart pound. Scientific prayer has 5 simple steps. Step 1 is recognition. You bring the mind to the truth that God is the only power, the only source, the only principle operating in the universe. Step 2 is unity. You acknowledge that the life working in Him is also working in you, that you are not separate, but connected by divine nature itself. Step 3 is acceptance. You recognize that the good you seek is already present, that protection is not something that will come, but something that is already here. Step 4 is affirmation. You speak clearly what you know is true, not as a wish, but as a certainty. Step 5 is gratitude. You give thanks as if the prayer is already fulfilled, because in consciousness it is fulfilled before it appears in your life. See how this works in daily life. Every morning before you leave home, instead of letting vague fear follow you, you can pause for a single minute and practice scientific prayer. You do not need a ritual or beautiful words. You only need clarity. You may say quietly, "God is the presence that protects me. I and everything that belongs to me are covered in His love and His light. Everywhere I go, He goes with me. Nothing outside has the right to touch the peace within me. I am grateful because this is the truth." When you do this, the first thing that changes is not the street, the people around you, or the events that may unfold today. What changes is the energy field of your mind. You walk out with a different atmosphere, a stillness that others may sense without knowing why, a safety that does not come from defense, but from the awareness that you are standing in His presence. When you walk outside, a sudden sound may startle you. The natural reaction is worry. But if you have practiced scientific prayer, you simply take a deep breath and whisper, "The only power here is God. I am calm. I am safe. I am guided." Immediately the mind shifts direction and peace returns. When facing troubling information, you can make a 3-minute prayer. There is no power in this circumstance except God. His light surrounds me. I am protected. I am grateful, because this is already the truth. Prayer does not make the event disappear instantly, but it removes the event's ability to control you. When you worry about someone you love, remember that prayer is not remote control over their life. Scientific prayer is bringing your mind into the truth that they too are in His hands. When you affirm this, you remove the fear that binds you and binds them. You do not love through worry. You love through faith. One common mistake is turning prayer into an attempt to change God's will. But scientific prayer does not act on Him. It acts on you. It cleans the dust of fear from your mind. It opens the door for light to enter. It clears the channel for the good that was already there. If you practice this daily, you will begin to notice something extraordinary. Problems you used to struggle with for hours suddenly reveal a clear answer. Things you feared do not come near. The things you need arrive at the right time without effort. This is not unusual magic. It is law. When consciousness is adjusted, life adjusts accordingly. Scientific prayer is the breath of those who live under the shadow of the Almighty. Not occasionally, but consistently. Not to beg, but to remember who they belong to. Not to try to be strong, but to stand still in the truth that He is their strength. The angels of God, the quiet wisdom guiding you. Since ancient times, people have believed that invisible forces move behind events. Forces as soft as breath, yet strong as the wind. Voices that make no sound, yet speak clearly in the mind. Scripture calls them angels. Ancient civilizations call them messengers of light. But in the spiritual science taught by Emmet Fox, angels are not winged beings and not creatures controlling human life from the outside. Angels are the pure thoughts of God, the streams of intelligence poured directly into consciousness when you are quiet enough to hear. Each angel is a holy idea. Each holy idea is a reminder that you never have to walk in darkness. Many people think angels are rare miracles, but they appear far more often than you realize. How many times in life have you suddenly felt the urge to stop, even though reason saw no danger? You changed direction at the last moment. You delayed a trip for no obvious cause. You stepped aside at the exact second needed. You reached out to someone without knowing why. Only later did you see that these small shifts spared you from what was not meant for you. That is not coincidence. That is not random intuition. That is an angel in the form of a peaceful thought. Angels always come in silence. They do not cut through the noise of worry. They do not shout over the storm of fear. Angels are never tense. Their guidance is as gentle as a thread, yet as clear as light. If the inner voice pushes you, rushes you, frightens you, or weighs you down, that voice is not an angel. That is fear in disguise. Angels do not pressure, they lead. They do not agitate, they soothe. They do not darken the mind, they illuminate it. When you live in the presence of God, your mind becomes sensitive to these subtle signals. You no longer search for signs outside. You begin to recognize signs within. People who live deeply in faith often say they have strong intuition, but that is not a special ability. That is simply angels having space to work. When the mind is noisy, angels are drowned out. When the mind is quiet, angels appear clearly. That is why cultivating inner stillness is so important. Not to hide from life, but to hear the call of the light. Another important truth is that angels never act against the principle of good. If a thought speaks to you through fear, suspicion, resentment, jealousy, selfishness, or harm, it cannot be an angel. Angels carry 3 marks: peace, clarity, love. If even one is missing, the thought is not from them. You can train your awareness of angels with a simple practice. Whenever you face a decision and the mind starts to divide itself, instead of rushing into analysis, pause, take a slow breath, and say within, I open myself to hear the idea of God. I am ready to receive the quiet wisdom guiding me. I do not listen to fear. I listen to the voice of peace. Then just wait. No force, no strain, no demand to hear anything. Just listen. For his ideas always find their way to you, but you must open the door through stillness. Many people have testified that they were saved from danger in the very last moment because a sudden urge made them slow down or change course. Some say they felt compelled to call someone, and that call prevented a serious crisis. Others sensed they needed to leave a place without knowing why, and later discovered that leaving kept them safe. These moments are angels moving through consciousness. No form needed, no thunder, only a flash of pure intuition. Angels are not supernatural exceptions reserved for a few. Angels are the natural law of spirit. When you are in truth, you are in the frequency of angels. Right ideas come at the right time. Gentle warnings appear when needed. Clear intuition opens in the right direction. This is the quiet yet powerful protection of heaven. To invite angels to work more often in your life, you do not need rituals. You only need one thing. Keep your mind often in the atmosphere of his presence. Even a busy person can do this. When you step outside, simply remember quietly, God is here. When you begin your work, remind yourself, his light guides me. When you must make a decision, say within, I listen to divine wisdom. Each gentle reminder is an open door, and angels enter through these small doors. Believe that you never walk alone. Never. Whenever life brings you to confusing crossroads, you can pause and place your hand on your heart. When you do this, you return to the inner space where angels whisper. You will notice that things once complicated become simple. Things once threatening reveal themselves as shadows. Things once without a way suddenly open a clear path, not because life has changed, but because you have heard the right voice. The angels of God do not stand on clouds. They stand in the awareness of the one who listens, and that awareness is the home where they work. Spiritual immunity, living inside an unbreakable field of protection. There is a promise that echoes from ancient times into this very moment. No harm shall come near you. No plague shall approach your dwelling. To many this sounds distant or symbolic, because reality seems filled with uncertainty, loss, and sudden disruptions. But in spiritual science, that promise is not comfort. It is a principle, and principle does not fail. So why do some people live with an unusual peace in crisis while others are easily swept into instability? The answer lies in consciousness, not circumstances, not environment, not luck, but consciousness. The human mind is the doorway through which good or harm enters one's experience. When the mind stays fixed on fear, it creates an atmosphere that attracts what it fears. When the mind stays fixed on truth, it creates a field that those things cannot penetrate. This is spiritual immunity. Not immunity because you hide, but immunity because inside you there is no empty space for darkness to cling to. Look at the law of spirit. Everything you experience starts from a seed of thought. No seed can grow unless the soil allows it. Likewise, no situation can touch you unless your consciousness gives it access. This is not blame. This is liberation. Because if consciousness is what determines experience, then you can change it. And if you can change consciousness, you can change your experience. When someone lives in fear, even if they say nothing, they emit a signal. That signal is like a door left slightly open. Anything aligned with that fear will look for a way in, not due to fate, not due to punishment, but due to resonance. Fear is an unconscious invitation. Faith is a strong refusal. If you believe that a second power exists outside God, even for a moment, in that moment you give weight to something that has no substance. But when consciousness remains grounded in Him, when you no longer place trust in appearances, when your mind is aligned with the one principle, a natural shield forms. Not a wall built from outside, but a radiance rising from within. When the light in your mind is stronger than the images outside, darkness cannot reach you, not because it is forced away, but because it finds no path. Across history, even in humanity's darkest periods, some people lived in remarkable peace. In war, some families remained whole amid destruction. In pandemics, some people stayed calm and healthy. In economic collapse, some stood firm, not because they were lucky, but because they did not let their mind fall with the mind of the crowd. They shared one thing. They lived with the awareness that there is only one power. When they saw upheaval, they did not let upheaval define them. When they heard bad news, they did not let it collapse their inner world. When they faced lack, they did not let worry seep into consciousness. And this steadfastness created spiritual immunity. Spiritual immunity does not mean you never face challenges. It means challenges cannot pierce you. They may circle around you, they may brush against the edges of your life, but they cannot cross the boundary of your inner being. It is like a storm raging at sea while a ship remains steady in the calm waters of a sheltered bay. The ship does not avoid the storm. It stands firm within it, and that firmness comes from within. Consider an everyday example. When you hear news about illness, most people instantly imagine darkness. They treat sickness as a power. They treat danger as something real. In that moment, consciousness drops to a lower level. But if you immediately return to the principle of truth and affirm there is no power except God, nothing in appearance can rise above the principle of good. My body is held in His life. When you say this, you adjust the frequency of your consciousness. And from that adjustment, immunity begins to work. Some ask, if this principle is true, why do misfortunes sometimes still happen? The answer is not in the failure of the principle. The answer lies in the areas of the human mind still untouched by light. Human consciousness is far larger than most realize. It holds beliefs they have forgotten, wounds they do not recall, habits they consider small, yet deeply influential. When a negative experience appears, it is not proof that God is absent. It is a signal that a part of the mind is ready to be healed. Not condemnation, invitation. A call to return to greater light. Try a small exercise. Think of a challenge you once faced. Ask yourself, where was my consciousness during that time? What did I believe? What did I give power to? With honest answers, you will see where the mind opened a door. And once you see it, you can close it. This is how spiritual immunity strengthens day by day. Not through perfection, but through a steady return to truth. Every day you can practice affirming, I live in the presence of God. Nothing can pierce the light that surrounds me. No appearance has authority over me. No circumstance has the final word. I am in Him, and He is in me. Each time you speak these words with full trust, another layer of light joins your shield. The more your mind unites with truth, the more truth becomes the natural atmosphere you live in. And when you live in that atmosphere, you walk through the world without being swallowed by it. Protecting the ones you love, when love is no longer tied to fear, one of the most delicate pains a human being carries is the worry for those they love. You can endure many things when they fall on you, but the moment you imagine a loved one in danger, your heart tightens. Love mixed with fear becomes a burden. Many even believe worry is proof of love. But in spiritual science, worry is never love. Worry is the signal that the mind is believing something untrue. Real love carries no shadow of fear. It carries the light of trust. When you worry for someone you love, you send them an unstable field of energy, not because you want to, but because your mind is being pulled down by the dark images you imagine. And those images add weight to their spirit as well. But when you stand in truth and pray from faith, you send a field of light, a feeling of calm, an invisible but powerful shield. You cannot protect someone by controlling their life. You cannot walk beside them every moment, make decisions for them, or carry the lessons they must learn, but you can send them a spiritual atmosphere, a quiet support only faith can generate. Protection is not control. Protection is placing them into the hands of the one who is stronger than you, wiser than you, and sees farther than you. When you pray for a loved one, the first thing you must do is put down your fear. Because if you pray in fear, you are unconsciously declaring that danger has power, and that kind of prayer does not lift them. It drags you down. In scientific prayer, you do not begin with what you want them to avoid. You begin with truth, that they are children of God, that they are covered in light, that His protection is greater than any image your mind could build. When you pray from faith, you are not violating their free will. You are not forcing them into your plans. You are not using spiritual energy to control their path. You are simply placing them in the field of light and letting good unfold naturally. This does not restrict them. It frees them. One of the most powerful practices is to picture the person you love inside a soft circle of light. Not a light you force yourself to imagine, not something you strain to create, but the awareness that the light is already there. You are simply witnessing truth. You may say within, a child of God is always protected. Light surrounds them, wisdom guides them, love lifts them. Nothing can touch the divine essence placed in them. The miracle is that when you do this correctly, you are not only protecting them, you are healing yourself, because love is no longer mixed with fear. It becomes purer, lighter, closer to its sacred nature. Parents often feel they must constantly watch over their children, always anticipating danger. But ask yourself, what do you want to send to your child? An atmosphere of anxiety or a field of light that steadies their steps? Many parents unknowingly wrap their children in fear instead of love. But spiritually mature parents are different. They do not push fear into their children. They fill their own mind with light, and that light steadies the entire family. You can protect your loved ones by keeping your mind in truth. One person living in light lifts an entire home. One person standing in peace makes the whole family feel safer. One person praying correctly creates a field so strong that harmful influences cannot pass through. If someone dear to you is far away, you can still cover them with affirmation. There is no distance in spirit. There is no separation in light. When you pray for them, that light reaches their frequency directly, not through physical paths. But above all, the most important practice is releasing. Releasing is not abandoning. Releasing is acknowledging that you cannot keep them safe by your own strength, but you know exactly where true safety is found. When you release fear, love in you becomes far stronger. When you release worry, peace becomes the atmosphere around them. Remember, you do not love with fear, you love with light. And that light is the fullest protection you can give. Now, I want to ask you something, so I know you are still here in this story. Is there someone in your life you want to cover with the light and protection of God? Speak their name in your heart, and if you wish, you may share it in the comments. Thank you for staying here with me. Your home, your possessions, and your provision. When everything that belongs to you is covered in light, many people believe spiritual life concerns only the inner realm of the soul, while matters like home, property, income, and work belong to the material world and therefore must be handled by human effort alone. But in spiritual science, there is no such division. God does not care only for your soul. He cares for every ordinary detail of your life, because all of it is part of you. And anything that belongs to you, when placed under the light, becomes part of divine order. The fear of losing what you have is one of the quietest yet strongest fears. It makes people tighten, cling, defend, tense, and sometimes turn things meant to bring peace into sources of worry. A house can be a refuge, but when fear enters, it becomes a mental prison. Savings can be a blessing, but when anxiety takes over, they become a weight. A job can be a gift, but when fear of losing it attaches itself to your mind, it becomes a burden. Here is the first truth you must remember. You do not own anything. You are simply entrusted to manage it. And managers carry less weight than owners. When you see yourself as the steward of God, you no longer fear loss. because what comes from him is protected by him. What no longer fits your life will be replaced by something better. When you change your perspective, you change your entire experience. Begin with your home. A house is not protected by locks. A house is protected by spiritual atmosphere. You have surely entered a home where peace was felt instantly, not because of the furniture or perfect arrangement, but because the person living there carries a quiet atmosphere. When a house is covered in the presence of God, even the walls seem to carry light. Not physical light, but the light of consciousness. In that atmosphere, harmful influences cannot enter, not because you fight them, but because they find no opening. You can protect your home with a simple daily affirmation. God is the presence in this home. Every door and every corner is held in his light. Nothing can disturb what belongs to his peace. When you say this with faith, you place your home inside a sacred circle, and within that circle, no darkness can break through. Your possessions also fall under divine protection, but your possessions are protected only when you do not treat them as idols. When people treat money as their main source, they immediately fall into a field of lack, because they put their trust in what can change. But when you know your source is unchanging and money is only a channel, you enter a safe place. No channel can close without another opening. Nothing can leave without something better drawing near. The fear of losing money does not arise from having little. It arises from believing your source is limited. But when you place your finances under the law of good, you realize that supply does not depend on your job, on numbers, or on a particular door. All supply comes from one source, God. When you understand this, fear dissolves. And when fear dissolves, your finances are freed from the negative energy you once wrapped around them. In everyday life, you can practice this very simply. Whenever income comes, you do not say, I must hold this tightly. You say, I am grateful because this came from the endless source. I use it with wisdom, and I trust that my supply never runs dry. These affirmations melt the invisible layers of anxiety in the mind, and when the mind clears, the flow opens. When facing the risk of loss instead of panic, you can return to the principle. Nothing is truly lost in God. Everything shifts form. Everything returns to a better order. This is not comforting theory. This is law. Because in the spiritual realm, only good has real substance. All loss is merely a change of shape within a larger process you cannot yet see fully. You can also protect your work by standing firm in the awareness that you work not for people, but for principle. And when you work in light, your results carry light. This not only keeps you safe from instability, but opens paths to places you could not reach by your own strength alone. But above all, the most important thing is not protecting your home or your possessions. The most important thing is protecting your mind from fear about them. Because if the mind remains steady, everything you have will remain steady. If the inner world is firm, the outer world cannot shake you. And one day when you look back, you will see that it was not the walls that protected you, not the numbers, not your cleverness. It was the presence of God in your consciousness that sustained everything. When protection seems to break, the most important spiritual test on your path, no one walks the spiritual journey without once asking, why did difficulty still come, even though I prayed, affirmed, denied, and declared faith? Why did I trust God, yet still find myself lost at times? Why did the promised protection seem to crack? This is a question every soul must face. And the answer is not in the absence of God. It is in the growth of your own inner being. When hardship appears, the first instinct is to struggle with yourself. You begin to doubt. Did I do something wrong? Is my faith not enough? Is God testing me? But spiritual truth does not operate on punishment and reward. God does not set an exam and watch to see who fails. What you call a test is often the rising of old beliefs that have not yet been healed. They do not come to shame you. They come to reveal the part of the mind still misaligned with truth. And when it is revealed, you have the chance to correct it. Every painful experience is the last layer of an old belief rising to the surface. It appears not to make you fall, but so you can look at it and say, I no longer belong to this. When you see hardship as a sentence, it crushes you. But when you see it as a signal, you rise above it. Look closely at the times you felt protection had failed. Notice something subtle. That moment was not the moment you lost faith. It was the moment real faith needed to be built. When things flow smoothly, faith is comfort. But when an unwanted circumstance appears, faith becomes substance. It is the moment you learn to stand in light instead of standing in emotion. Many people pray so that bad things will not happen. But in scientific prayer, the focus is not the outer result. The focus is the inner state. When practiced correctly, hardship has no authority over you, even if it appears in form. The spiritually immature believe protection means never facing difficulty. The spiritually mature know protection means difficulty cannot pierce the inner core. It may touch the outer surface, but it cannot touch the soul. When something painful happens, you do not need to blame yourself. You do not need to dig through your past to find what you did wrong. The spiritual law does not punish you with old memories. It simply shines a light on what needs realignment. Once you see that you are already halfway through, one of the most important steps is releasing guilt. Guilt is one of the lowest energies, and it pulls people deeper into darkness. But you were not born to carry guilt. You were born to stand in light. When something goes wrong, speak to yourself with honesty and kindness. I did the best I knew. I am ready to see what needs renewal. I am ready to rise to a higher level of consciousness. No event can separate me from the truth that I belong to God. What you need in such moments is not analysis. What you need is reconnection. When the mind is in turmoil, return to the center. Place your hand over your heart and speak slowly. God is here. His light does not leave me. I stand in truth. Circumstance does not define me. Truth defines me. When you speak this, you draw your mind back into the light. And in that moment, protection begins to restore itself. Remember that in every difficult experience, the thing being tested is not your belief in God. It is your belief in the shadow that still lingers in the mind. Hardship does not ask, do you believe in him? It asks, do you still believe in anything other than him? And when you answer by returning to truth, hardship loses power instantly. Look at people who have walked through trials in extraordinary ways. You will see they share one trait. They do not deny that they are hurting. But they refuse to believe that hurt has authority over them. They may shed tears, but they do not fall out of faith. They may be weak for a moment, but they never lose their inner strength. In the end, you will realize the experiences that seemed to break you were the stones that built your inner foundation. Each difficulty you walk through deepens your understanding of spiritual law, your understanding of divine protection, and your understanding of yourself. Now, I invite you to do something small but powerful. If you have ever had an experience that made you feel protection did not arrive in time, leave a comment saying, I am ready to change, or a single number, so I know you are stepping into healing and returning to the light. Living under the shadow of the Almighty, when protection becomes a way of life. Living under the shadow of the Almighty is not something you do only when you need help. It is not an emergency response, nor a lifestyle reserved for people with deep spiritual maturity. It is the natural way of life for anyone who decides their mind will no longer drift with the world's fluctuations, but will stand firmly on one principle, the principle of absolute good, the principle of one power, the principle of unbreakable peace. Many people live their whole lives feeling like leaves in the wind. A small event unsettles them. A careless word troubles them for hours. A piece of bad news shakes them for days. But that is not the true nature of a human being. You were created to stand on solid ground like a mountain. You were created to walk with peace like a quiet river. You were created to live in light and to know deeply that nothing can separate you from his protection. But for this to become reality, you must build it into a lifestyle, not a momentary feeling. What does it mean to live under the shadow of the Almighty? It means you do not remember God only when trouble comes. Even on your calmest days, you keep your mind in the light. When you cook, you know he is there. When you drive, you know he is there. When you work, you know he is there. And when you lie in stillness before sleep, you know he is there. You live in awareness of his presence the way you breathe. When his presence becomes the atmosphere of your mind, protection is no longer something you ask for, but something you live in. Most human anxiety comes from forgetting where they belong. They let their mind chase news, opinions, past memories, or future fears. But a person who lives under his shadow does not let the mind wander like that. They bring it back to center, not by fighting thoughts, not by forcing perfection, simply guiding the mind back home the way you guide a lost child. A day lived under the shadow of the Almighty has 3 rhythms: the morning rhythm, the midday rhythm, and the evening rhythm. The morning rhythm is the most important. Emmet Fox called it the golden hour, the moment before the noise of the world touches the mind. If you take even a few minutes to place your awareness in the light your entire day aligns, you do not need long prayers. You simply place your hand on your chest and say within, today I choose to live in the presence of God. I do not belong to fear. I do not belong to circumstance. I belong to light. He goes before me in every step. When you say this, you place your soul on the right foundation to enter the day. The midday rhythm is where most people lose their peace. Work, children, messages, surprises, small conflicts scatter the mind. But for one who lives in his presence, midday is the opportunity to return. You can pause for only a few seconds and say quietly, God is here, and that alone draws you back into the light. The evening rhythm is the time to review the mind, not to judge yourself, but to see how many times today you remembered his presence. You may ask gently, was there a moment today I forgot I was covered? If so, you do not blame yourself. You simply say, tomorrow I will return sooner. Evening is the reconciliation between you and yourself. It allows you to sleep in peace. And when you sleep in peace, you wake in light. A clear sign of someone living under his shadow is freedom from fear of what is ahead. Many people carry the burden of tomorrow. They imagine worst-case scenarios, dangers that have not happened, uncertainties that may never come. But a person who lives under the shadow of the Most High knows this. Tomorrow is not a dark space. Tomorrow is a place where God has already gone ahead and prepared everything. They do not step into the next day with defensiveness. They step into it as though entering a room already lit. The deepest spiritual experience is peace independent of circumstances. When you have that, you are truly living under his shadow. And that peace is not emptiness. It is the steady inner knowing that everything happening is held by a wisdom far greater than yours, a wisdom that sees the entire picture while you see only a fragment. Living under the shadow of the Almighty also means you become a source of light for others, not because you try to teach, but because your peace naturally radiates. When others see you remain calm in difficulty, they find strength. When they see you unmoved by fear, they feel supported. When they see you walk in the light, they know they can walk that way too. Eventually, you realize that living under his shadow is no longer a choice. It is your nature. You no longer struggle to remember. You no longer force anything. You simply breathe in his presence. You simply live in his protection. You simply walk in his light. And in that place, every step you take, every decision you make, every word you speak becomes evidence of one truth: that you do not walk alone, that you have never walked alone, and that the shadow of the Almighty is the shelter you will never leave again. Living in his shadow, from small habits to great transformation. One of the deepest truths of spiritual life is this: no one becomes a person who lives under the shadow of the Almighty through moments of intense emotion, not through tears during prayer, not through brief peaks of spiritual inspiration. Those moments are beautiful, but they do not sustain protection. Protection, peace, and true strength appear only when the awareness of his presence becomes a daily lifestyle. Not occasional breakthroughs, but steady rhythms. Not a strong gust of wind, but a continuous flow of light. People often think spiritual transformation must come from something dramatic, a striking miracle, a powerful sacred encounter. But in reality, most transformation does not arrive like thunder. It arrives like droplets. Droplets carve valleys. Habits shape life. Every time you choose to return to awareness of Him, even for half a second, you strengthen the golden thread. Every time you choose scientific denial instead of letting fear lead, you tighten your foundation. Every time you affirm truth instead of chasing appearances, you widen the circle of light that covers you. The protection of God does not come from the outside. It comes from the inner state. The inner state is the only fortress no force can penetrate when it belongs to Him. But that fortress does not appear on its own. It is built from small bricks, and those bricks are habits. The first habit of someone who lives under His shadow is the habit of returning. No one keeps their mind in the light all day, but a spiritual person returns quickly. They do not let fear linger. They do not let negative thoughts spread. They do not let emotions take over. Each time they notice themselves drifting, they return instantly with one simple line: God is here. His light covers me. When you repeat this daily, the time you spend in darkness shortens, and the time you stand in light lengthens. The second habit is the habit of observing without judgment. A person living in his shadow is not afraid to look at their own fears, their weak spots, their ego when it rises. They know that seeing is the first step to healing. When strong emotion appears, they do not rush to push it away. They observe. They acknowledge. They say quietly, "This is just an old habit. It no longer has power." And the moment they say that, the emotion loses half its weight. The third habit is the habit of staying in the present. Fear lives in the future. Pain lives in the past. But the presence of God is always in the now. When you return to this moment, you step into the holiest space. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, right now. Someone who lives under His shadow often whispers within, "Now is enough. He is here. I am safe in this very moment." The fourth habit is the habit of choosing light in every small decision. When you speak, you choose light or shadow. When you react, you choose peace or anger. When you face a situation, you choose faith or fear. Living under the shadow of the Almighty means choosing light more often. Not perfectly, but increasingly. The fifth habit is the habit of gratitude. Nothing strengthens spiritual protection like gratitude, because gratitude places your mind in the receiving state. When you give thanks for protection, even before seeing it, you tell your mind that truth is already present. You do not ask for what has not arrived. You receive what already exists. Gratitude is the quickest bridge into His presence. And finally, the most important habit is nurturing stillness. You do not need much. Just a few minutes a day. Turn down the noise of life. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. In those few minutes, the mind settles and angels can work. In those few minutes, you remember who you are. In those few minutes, the circle of light around you grows thicker and wider, not by effort, but by quietness. A person who lives under the shadow of the Almighty is not perfect. They are simply someone who chooses the right direction more often. They choose truth. They choose to return. They choose peace. They choose light. And because they choose it, continually protection becomes a lifestyle. Peace becomes the atmosphere. Faith becomes reflex. Light becomes the natural language of their soul. And one day they realize they no longer need to try to enter His shadow. They are already living in it, like fish in water, like trees in soil, like light in space. Holding the light in great winds, the inner strength of one who lives under His shadow. There are days when everything flows so smoothly you do not need to try to feel peace. But there are also days when the whole world seems to ask whether you are truly living in the light. Days when news comes in waves, unexpected problems arise, people act in confusing ways, and your inner life feels like it is being hit by 100 winds at once. These are the most important days to prove the strength of someone who lives under the shadow of the Almighty. Because light does not prove itself on calm mornings, it proves itself in great winds. Many people think living in the light means avoiding trials, but the truth is different. Living in the light is not avoiding storms. Living in the light is walking through storms without losing yourself. It is keeping your mind steady. It is letting the presence of God be stronger than the noise of the world. It is standing still inside even when everything outside is shaking. A clear sign that you are maturing spiritually is when your reaction to turbulence begins to change. Before, a small problem could make you anxious, panicked, running toward every worst-case scenario your imagination created. But as you grow in faith, you will notice a space opening between the event and your reaction. You no longer react instantly. You pause. You breathe. You remember. God is here. He is with me in this moment. I am not separated from the light. And with just that one line, the storm loses half its force. One of the subtle truths of the spiritual path is realizing that challenges do not come to break you. They come to strengthen your foundation. If you never face strong winds, you will never know how deep your roots truly are. If you never walk through night, you will never know how powerful your inner light becomes. And if you never meet fear, you will never learn how to choose faith. Holding the light in great winds is not a matter of forcing yourself to be strong. That only exhausts you. Holding the light means releasing what needs to be released. You release the need to control. You release the need to understand everything. You release the need to fix things instantly. And you place your heart in the hands of the one who is stronger than every situation. You let him work in the parts of your mind you cannot yet see. You let him guide when you cannot see the path. You let him arrange what you do not know how to start. A person who lives under his shadow does not panic because they know one simple truth. Nothing happens outside his sight. No circumstance escapes his reach. No event can separate him from you. Fear comes only from believing you are carrying everything on your own. But when you remember you do not walk alone, peace returns like breath. In great winds, the most important thing you can do is keep your mind from running into the shadows. Do not imagine the worst. Do not let the words of others shake you. Do not let fear guide your actions. Do only one thing. Return inward. Say quietly, I am in him, he is in me. Light covers me. Darkness has no door to enter. When you do this, the wind may continue to blow, but it cannot carry you away. Remember that your first reaction shapes much of the experience ahead. If you react with fear, you open the door to waves of anxiety. But if you react with awareness that God is present, you close that door instantly. Everything that follows becomes lighter, calmer, and more orderly. Understand that holding the light does not mean you feel nothing. You may still feel sad, worried, disappointed, or tired. Those emotions do not make you weak. They confirm you are human. Strength is not about being emotionless. Strength is about refusing to let emotion decide whether you stand in light or shadow. In your hardest days, you will notice something extraordinary. Whenever you choose light, even with a small affirmation, a single deep breath, or a minute of stillness, his angels do their work immediately. You receive clarity you forgot you had. You feel peace you did not think you could feel in that moment. You receive guidance, a gentle thought, a quiet whisper that leads you forward. This is not luck. This is the law of one who lives under the shadow of the Most High. When you hold the light holds you. When you choose peace, peace chooses you. When you keep your faith, protection naturally activates. And now, to know you are still here with this journey, I want to ask you one thing. Is there something in your life right now that is testing the light within you? If you wish, share a short line or a single keyword in the comments. Thank you for being present. When the heart becomes the home of protection, how he keeps you safe in every part of life. Throughout the search for peace, people often assume protection is something that happens outside. A strong house, a locked door, a stable bank account, a circle of loved ones to lean on. But over time, everyone discovers moments when even inside the strongest house, they still feel unsettled. Moments when they are surrounded by people who love them, yet their heart feels lonely. Moments when money is stable, but the mind refuses to rest. And in those moments, you finally understand a core truth. True protection does not come from the outside. True protection begins inside your own heart. A heart that places itself under the shadow of the Almighty makes everything outside secondary. Circumstances may change. People may change. The world may change. But when the heart stands in the light, you are not swept away. Because when light resides within you, you become your own refuge. Instead of expecting the world to give you peace, you bring your peace into the world. Spiritual protection is not a hard armor. It is like an atmosphere around you, a field of invisible light preventing disturbance from entering your mind. When you walk into a crowded place, that light walks with you. When you face danger, it stands between you and the situation. When you sleep, it covers you like a quiet mist. But for that light to be strong, your heart must be its daily home, not an occasional visit. The heart is the center of every decision, every emotion, every reaction. Where the heart leans decides whether you belong to light or to fear. That is why the first thing you must learn is clearing the heart of old beliefs. Beliefs that make you think you are unworthy of protection. Beliefs that make the world seem more dangerous than it is. Beliefs that force you to fight life instead of standing in the presence of the one who made you. When a wrong belief drops away, new space opens within, and that space is quickly filled by truth. The truth that you are a child of the Creator of all things. The truth that you do not navigate life by your own strength. The truth that the one who shaped every breath in you never leaves you. And when the heart embraces these truths, you become safe in a way no wall can provide. Spiritual protection does more than shield you. It reshapes your entire life. When the heart stands in light, relationships around you become more harmonious. When you no longer defend yourself from fear, you communicate with more clarity, more love, more stability. And even when someone approaches with heavy energy, your heart is not easily pierced the way it once was. You see them through light, and the light in you weakens their influence. In work, spiritual protection shows through clarity. You develop strong intuition. You know when to stop, when to move, when to stay silent, when to speak. Every step looks natural, yet is guided by a wisdom beyond your own. You no longer make choices from panic, but from inner calm. And that calm leads you to the right place at the right time with the right people. In family, spiritual protection shows through the atmosphere you bring. You do not react with irritation as before. You do not get pulled into small conflicts. You no longer let outer disturbances shake your heart. Your presence becomes a place others feel safe. And the beautiful thing is that when you live in the light, the people around you begin to change in ways they never did before. Even in financial life, a heart living under his shadow no longer operates by the world's panic. You do not spend out of fear of lack. You do not cling to possessions because you fear losing them. You understand money is a flow that moves easily through someone who is conscious of the infinite source. When fear leaves, the heart finances settle naturally. But the most beautiful part of spiritual protection is this. It does not make you hard. It makes you soft. When you know you are protected, you become gentler in your speech. You become calmer in difficulty. You become more generous with others, more compassionate with your own mistakes, because you are no longer defensive. The one who defends themselves is the one who believes they are alone. But the one who lives under his shadow knows they are never alone. And then one day on this journey, you feel a very quiet but very deep shift. No longer am I seeking protection. Protection is living in me. No longer am I running to him when something happens. He is already in me at all times. No longer am I trying to believe. Faith has become my natural breath. That is the moment your heart becomes the home of protection. A home not built of stone or wood, but built of presence, truth, stillness, and absolute trust. When you become the living witness of protection, the journey closes, but the light does not. At the final stretch of this journey, there is something every person who lives under the shadow of the Almighty eventually realizes. You are no longer someone trying to learn about protection. You have become the living proof of it. You no longer search for peace. You carry peace with you. You no longer ask whether he is with you. You know it the way you know the breath in your chest. And when someone reaches this place, their entire life becomes the quiet but powerful sermon of the presence of God. People often think that to change their life, they must change their circumstances. But when the mind steps into the light, you do not need to change circumstance. Circumstance changes according to you. Before this, you tried to control everything. You thought you needed to perfect everything in order to be safe. But now you know safety does not come from what you control. It comes from where you place your awareness. When awareness stands in the right place, everything outside stands in the right position. A person who truly lives under his shadow carries something very special. Wherever they go, they bring an atmosphere that makes others feel at ease. They do not need to speak much. They do not need to prove anything. Their presence simply reminds people that peace is real. When they face difficulty, the way they remain calm makes others wonder, what is protecting this person? How can they be so steady? And in those moments, your life itself becomes the message of the Almighty's shadow. The spiritual path does not end in understanding. It ends in becoming. You no longer remind yourself to believe because faith becomes natural. You no longer struggle with fear because fear finds no door to enter. You no longer force yourself to affirm truth because truth becomes the atmosphere of your mind. One of the greatest shifts that occurs when you live in the light is that you begin to see everything around you through the lens of truth. You see others with kindness instead of suspicion. You see challenges with calm instead of panic. You see the future with hope instead of dark predictions. These changes do not come from effort. They come from moving your place of standing, from darkness to light, from anxiety to trust, from self-power to divine power. And then you begin to notice that the things which once frightened you no longer reach you. Old wounds have healed. Old memories that once hurt you carry no weight. Old fears that once haunted you feel like distant echoes. Because your heart is living in a shelter nothing can penetrate. A person who lives under his shadow also carries a rare quality. They speak less about fear and more about hope. They think less about problems and more about solutions. They focus less on what is wrong and more on what can be healed. This is not blind optimism. It is the awareness that everything in life has a doorway of light if you look in the right direction. People like this do more than protect themselves. They become a refuge for others. When others despair, they are the person everyone wants to come to, not because they have special advice, but because they have light. Light in their words, light in the way they listen, light in their presence. And that light does not come from them, it comes from the one who lives within them. The deepest spiritual journey is not going to find God. It is realizing he never left you. Every moment of your life, whether you knew it or not, he was behind you, before you, above you, around you, and within you. And when you live in that awareness, you become free in a way nothing can bind, free from anxiety, free from fear, free from the past, free from the future, free from the need to protect yourself, because you know the one who protects you never sleeps and never leaves his post. Now, as the 16-part journey closes, you already have every doorway you need to step into a new way of living, the way of someone who knows they are covered, someone who knows they are protected, someone who knows they never walk alone, someone who knows the shadow of the Almighty is the true home of the soul. But you must remember one thing. This journey does not end here. It begins here. Each day, each hour, each moment, you will continue practicing, returning, standing in the light, and these small acts will keep your life covered in a spiritual safety that cannot be shaken. And when others look at your life, they will see a testimony without words, that there is a peace no force can break. There is a protection no darkness can pierce. There is a strength no power can match. and you are the living witness of it.